Have you ever been there?
Yeah.
You're racing against a deadline, totally focused, and then, boom, another security thing pops up.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a clunky password reset or like that multi-factor prompt that just feels like it's trying to stop you, not actually protect you.
It's such a common feeling, that tension, right, between just wanting to get your work done and trying to stay safe online.
Exactly. And it might seem like just a small frustration, but actually, it's a huge challenge for basically every organization today.
It really is. It touches everything in the digital workplace.
Absolutely. So today, we're doing a deep dive into that constant tug of war, cybersecurity versus productivity.
That push and pull.
Yeah. We're going to unpack why employees sometimes, go around security measures, look at the hidden risks and those shortcuts that seem harmless.
That's it, right.
Right. And most importantly, explore how organizations are trying to find that sweet spot. Protecting their assets without killing innovation or leading to that security fatigue we hear about.
And we've got some really interesting sources for this. Insights from studies by Forbes, Delinea, Ping Identity. They give a great window into employee behavior.
Okay.
Then there's the NCSC, that's the UK's National Cybersecurity Center on Malicious Insiders. Plus, strategic stuff from Worldwide Technology, Cyber Sierra, Mimecast, and Safe Controls on agile security and managing risk.
So quite a stack. Our mission today is really to dig into the human side of cybersecurity. Understand the why behind some risky actions.
Yeah, the motivations.
Exactly, and explore strategies that actually work for building a place that's both secure and productive. Hopefully you'll leave with a clearer view of the risks and how to maybe shift from just, ticking compliance boxes to real organizational strength.
And we want to mention that this deep dive is brought to you by CMMC NIST Tools at www.cmmcnist.tools and SOC Assessment at www.socassessment.com. They really help organizations handle the complexities of cybersecurity compliance and keeping operations secure.
Great resources. Okay, so let's jump into this core problem. There was a CyberArk study, Forbes talked about it, finding that a massive 65% of office workers admit they bypass company security policies.
65%.
Yeah, just for efficiency. And then Delinea found 79% engage in risky behaviors, even when they know the dangers. 65%. That's not just a few people being careless, right? It feels like something bigger is going on.
It really does. And what's fascinating, or maybe worrying, is the why is almost always about productivity.
Trying to do their job.
Exactly. They aren't trying to be bad actors. They're just trying to meet deadlines, get things done, which, makes you ask, are security measures actually designed with how people work in mind?
Good question. Is the design part of the problem?
It seems like there's a real disconnect there between what security teams think people should do and what people actually do under pressure.
And when you look at the specific behaviors Delinea and Forbes found, it paints a pretty vivid picture. It's not just one-offs.
No, it's widespread.
Things like, almost half reusing logins across different work apps, and 36% using the same ones for personal and work accounts.
That mixing of personal and professional credentials is a huge risk vector. And then you add things like 30% just sharing workplace passwords with colleagues.
Wow, sharing passwords.
Yeah. It completely undermines having unique logins or even MFA in the first place. And 80%, a huge number, access work apps from personal devices that have basically zero corporate security controls on them.
So their personal laptop, their phone, could be totally unprotected from a work perspective.
Precisely. And then there's the patching issue, 36% delaying security updates on those personal devices used for work.
Which leaves known vulnerabilities open.
Exactly. And 35% saving passwords in their browser. That's just asking for trouble if the browser gets compromised.
It feels so convenient at the time, though.
It does until it isn't. And now with AI tools becoming common, 72% are using them, but almost 40% either ignore company policy about sensitive data input or there is no policy.
So company secrets could just be fed into public AI models.
Potentially, yeah. Becoming part of the training data, maybe exposed later. It's a massive unmanaged risk. Like you said, it's the digital version of leaving the keys under the mat. Easy, but so risky.
That's a spot-on analogy. It really hammers home that old saying, right? A chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And it seems like humans, often unintentionally, are that link.
Often, yeah.
Forbes points to the core reasons. Convenience versus security. The protocols just feel too heavy.
Too much friction.
Yeah, exactly. And there's the pressure to deliver deadlines. It's just Trump's security steps sometimes. And, of course, just the lack of awareness. People don't always get the real risk of what seems like a small shortcut.
And all this friction and pressure leads directly to this idea of security fatigue. Ping Identity talks about this.
Right.
Users just get worn down. Constant warnings, password prompts, authentication requests. You just get tired of it all. It leads to decision fatigue.
Like alarm fatigue in hospitals. You hear so many beeps, you start tuning them out.
That's a great comparison. And it includes things like MFA fatigue.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about that, the prompt bombing thing.
Exactly. Attackers exploit it. They flood your device with MFA approval requests, maybe hundreds, hoping you'll just reflexively hit approve out of sheer annoyance or confusion.
So the very tool meant to protect you becomes an attack vector because it's just annoying.
It can be, if not implemented well. It creates this vulnerability. And if security feels too hard overall, people might just give up trying. That's learned helplessness. They default back to whatever's easiest, not safest.
What does that look like in practice? What are the symptoms?
Well, you see things like less attention during security training, more password resets because people forget complex ones, using weak passwords or sharing them, ignoring software updates, bypassing security, like not using the VPN on public Wi-Fi, or clicking on iffy links because they're just not thinking critically anymore. They're fatigued.
And connecting this back to the business, security fatigue isn't just one person's problem, is it? It sounds like a system issue, like maybe the tools aren't user-friendly enough.
Absolutely. It's often a design flaw, and it has real consequences. IBM says the average data breach costs nearly $5 million. That's serious money, plus huge security risks and potential compliance fines.
And it's not just the huge companies feeling this. Delinea found smaller businesses, SMBs, are often more vulnerable.
That's right. They're less likely to have things like MFA or VPNs fully rolled out. They often get less training, too.
And maybe they feel like they're not a target.
Yeah, only 37% of very small SMBs, under 10 employees, thought they were really at risk. Compare that to over half for larger companies. But attackers know this. They specifically look for those less defended networks.
So being small doesn't mean you're safe. It might actually make you more attractive to certain attackers.
It can, yeah. Which really highlights that security isn't just about the tech, but how it's used or bypassed.
Okay, speaking of bypassing tools, that brings us to another big vulnerability. Shadow IT.
Ah, yes, the hidden network.
Mimecast defines it as basically any unauthorized apps, hardware, software used without IT knowing. And they estimate it could be 10 times higher than the IT the company actually knows about.
It's staggering, isn't it? And it usually pops up because employees, again, want efficiency. Maybe the official tools are clunky or don't exist, or they just like using something else like Asana instead of the company's Basecamp, or setting up work email on their personal phone in a way that gets around security.
So again, often not malicious intent, just trying to get the job done faster or better with tools they like. But sounds like a recipe for problems. What are the big risks there?
That's the key. Shadow IT can sometimes boost productivity or flag needs IT hasn't met. But the downsides are huge. Data getting leaked from these shadow systems shot up 40% in just 1 year recently.
40%? Wow.
And over half of cyber attacks now apparently stem from exploiting shadow IT. Plus, think about compliance. If sensitive data is in apps, IT doesn't even know about.
Can't protect it.
Exactly. You risk massive fines. HIPAA violations have cost companies over $133 million total. PCI non-compliance, for payment cards, can be up to $100 a month. GDPR fines can hit 4% of global revenue. It's serious.
Okay, so unauthorized tech is one internal risk. What about the people themselves? The malicious insider threat?
Right. The NCSC defines this as anyone with legitimate access, employees, contractors, partners who uses that access for bad reasons. It's rarer than, say, external phishing, but the potential impact is enormous because they're already inside the castle walls.
Why do insiders do this? What are the typical motives?
It varies. Sometimes it's personal gain, maybe stealing customer lists or designs for a future job. Sometimes it's revenge against the company. Ideology can play a role. Even just ego, or sometimes hoarding data without necessarily meaning harm initially.
Right.
Or they could be coerced by outsiders.
And how do they actually get the data out? Is it super sophisticated stuff?
Sometimes, but often it's surprisingly simple. Emailing it to personal accounts or fake addresses, using webmail, copying to USB drives or ND cards, secure messaging apps like WhatsApp or Signal, even online meeting platforms or social media, or just connecting via Wi-Fi or Bluetooth.
So everyday tools can become exfiltration channels.
Absolutely. And they might try to hide it. Copy-pasting small bits of text over time, taking screenshots, saving files with different names or formats, translating text, shrinking files, embedding them in other documents.
Or that steganography thing, hiding data in images.
Yeah, like in JPEGs. It can be hard to detect. This whole area just underscores that cybersecurity isn't only about locking the doors against outsiders. You have to manage internal risks too.
It really makes you think about trust versus monitoring, doesn't it? How do you strike that balance? You hear about cases like Edward Snowden using USB drives, or that supermarket employee who downloaded data onto one, or the UK government leak via WhatsApp. Simple methods, huge consequences when controls fail.
Exactly. It shows that even basic controls, properly enforced, are critical.
Okay, so we've painted a picture of the challenges: employee behavior, fatigue, shadow IT, insiders. Now, how do organizations actually fix this? How do they find that sweet spot you mentioned?
Yeah, Safe Controls talks about this concept. Too much security creates friction, slows things down, maybe even destroys business value, and makes the security team unpopular.
The Department of No.
Right. The goal is to find the optimal point where security is effective without killing productivity or making employees check out. And that sweet spot isn't static. It shifts as the organization gets better at security.
Interesting. So you don't just crank security to 11 everywhere.
No, that often backfires. Safe Controls suggests looking at it in 3 dimensions. First, business process risk. Really understand what matters most, what needs the tightest protection, and prioritize.
Okay, focus protection where it counts.
Second, lean process flow. Optimize your workflows first. Remove unnecessary steps. Then figure out how to add security controls efficiently. Don't just slap security onto a broken process.
Makes sense. Streamline, then secure.
And third, capacity for change. How ready is your workforce? A motivated team with clear goals can actually handle more security measures without feeling bogged down. Assess that capacity.
So don't push more security than the organization can realistically absorb and adopt effectively.
Precisely. Start with the basics. Build maturity gradually. They give an example of an engineering firm that moved away from heavy-handed standardization towards better MFA and optimizing workflows. Security improved, and staff motivation went up. It's about being smarter, not just stricter.
This really sounds like it needs to be more than just an IT initiative. It's about culture.
Absolutely. Community Join the Tribe emphasizes this. Cybersecurity has to be a collective, security-first culture. Everyone's responsibility, not just IT's problem to solve.
So how do you build that culture? Where do you start?
Leadership is key. Leaders have to walk the talk, visibly prioritize security, weave it into strategic planning, maybe even include security metrics and business KPIs.
Send a clear message from the top.
Exactly. And then simplifying the tools. Security tech has to work well, obviously, but it also has to be user-friendly. Seamless integration into how people actually work is critical to stop them from finding workarounds.
Make the secure way the easy way, ideally.
That's the goal. And training needs to go beyond just spotting basic phishing emails. It should cover strong password habits, recognizing social engineering tactics. Maybe appoint cybersecurity champions within different departments.
Like peer educators.
Yeah, people who can be liaisons, answer questions, keep security top of mind locally. And it needs to be continuous, regular drills, updates on new threats, using real incidents as learning moments. Fostering an environment where people feel safe reporting potential issues without fear of blame is huge.
Open communication. Makes sense. Now, worldwide technology suggests bringing agile principles into cybersecurity. How does that work?
It's about bringing that efficiency, consistency, visibility, and collaboration you see in agile software development into the security world, being more adaptive and responsive.
So, less rigid, more flexible.
Kind of. For CISOs, WWT recommends a few things. First, really earn an agile culture. Don't just impose it. Maybe do a culture gap analysis, run workshops.
Get buy-in.
Yes. Second, pick 2 or 3 clear use cases to start with, maybe securing network segments or running penetration tests on mobile apps using agile sprints, those short work cycles. Show some quick wins.
Build momentum.
Exactly. Third, empower a trusted team, like a security center of excellence, to make decisions quickly. General Stanley McChrystal talks about needing flexibility and speed through empowered execution. That applies here too.
Let the experts run with it.
Right. And finally, foster collaboration. Multi-team meetings, workshops, shared platforms break down those silos between security, IT, and the business units.
Okay, so Agile helps with how you do security. What about what security you focus on? Moving beyond just compliance.
Yes, that's critical. Cyber Sierra really emphasizes that risk management is more than just ticking compliance boxes. Compliance gives you a baseline.
You need security for compliance, but having compliance doesn't automatically mean you're secure against everything.
Precisely. Compliance frameworks often don't capture your organization's unique risks fully. Real cybersecurity risk is where threats, vulnerabilities, and consequences overlap for your specific situation.
But measuring that risk is hard, isn't it? People talk about likelihood times impact, but that feels overly simple sometimes.
It often is. Translating a technical vulnerability into real business impact dollars. Operational disruption. That's tough. And there isn't one single standard way everyone does it.
So what are better approaches?
Using established frameworks like NIST SP 830 for risk assessment is a good start. Adopting more nuanced, multidimensional risk scoring, factoring in threat sophistication, data sensitivity, how effective your controls are. Maintaining a detailed risk register.
A living document of your risks.
Exactly. Then you decide for each risk. Accept it, mitigate it, reduce it, transfer it, like with cyber insurance, or avoid it altogether by changing a process. And build clear policies around these decisions. Crucially, you need continuous monitoring.
Not just a once-a-year check.
Right. Implement continuous control monitoring, CCM, to constantly verify your defenses are working. Use threat intelligence to stay current. Risk isn't static.
So the big picture shift is build a risk-aware culture.
Yes. Align your security spending with your actual risk priorities, not just compliance minimums. And learn to talk about risk in business terms, revenue impact, operational downtime, fines, not just technical jargon.
That makes sense. As organizations try to balance security and usability and move beyond simple compliance to really grasp their risk, resources can help guide that journey.
Absolutely. And that's where services like CMMC NIST tools at www.cmmcnist.tools and SOC assessment at www.soassessment.com can be incredibly valuable, helping map out that path to a stronger, more adaptable security posture.
Right. And tying back to that usability point, Beyond Identity talks about frictionless security as a solution to fatigue and bypass.
Yeah, they argue that traditional authentication, especially some MFA methods, is just too friction-filled.
Creates drag.
It does. They cite figures like U.S. employees losing 22 minutes a week to cumbersome security, and adoption rates for things like Azure AD MFA being surprisingly low, only 22% back in 2021, partly because of the hassle factor.
And that friction pushes people to find those risky workarounds we talked about.
Exactly. So the solution they propose is truly passwordless, frictionless MFA.
What does that actually mean?
It means using things that are inherently resistant to phishing, like biometrics, fingerprint, face scan, special cryptographic security keys, checking the security status of the device itself, all running seamlessly in the background.
So I just touch my fingerprint sensor and the system does all the complex checks without me needing multiple steps.
That's the idea. It boosts productivity because it's fast and easy, and it boosts security because these methods are much harder to compromise than passwords or even some traditional MFA prompts.
Making security strong and invisible, or at least minimally intrusive.
That's the holy grail, really. Ensuring data is more secure without driving users crazy. Security becomes an enabler, not a barrier.
That really ties everything together. So wrapping up, we've seen cybersecurity is fundamentally a human issue, right? Tied up with productivity, convenience, culture.
Definitely not just tech.
Employees bypass security due to pressure, fatigue, creating risks like shadow IT leaks or enabling insider threats. The way forward seems to involve finding that organizational sweet spot.
Balancing security and workflow.
Yeah, adopting agile thinking, building security culture from the leadership down, simplifying tools massively, and shifting focus from just compliance to true continuous risk management.
And maybe embracing that frictionless security ideal.
So here's a final thought to chew on. If your security measures make your employees feel less productive, are those measures actually making your organization more secure? Or could they be, paradoxically, creating hidden risks?
It's a critical question for every leader, every security professional, really every employee to consider.
What steps could you take starting today to help make security less of a roadblock, more of an invisible, supportive part of getting work done and achieving your organization's mission?
Something to think about in your own daily interactions with those security protocols. How does your organization strike that balance?
Definitely food for thought. Thanks for diving deep with us today.